Good morning everyone, Rukshan here, and thanks for joining me for this video. So I'm going to share with you the latest of what's being called a conspiracy theory, and that is something that was said by the chief scientific advisor to Boris Johnson in the UK. See, today they're having their press conference to coincide with Freedom Day, so it's talking about the lifting of restrictions and lifting of lockdowns in the UK and what the future looks like, right? And one of the questions that was asked was around how many people that are coming to hospital at the moment have been double jabbed. And I'm going to share the video of this, and I'm going to share some tweets that happened afterwards and some corrections even. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's turned into this massive conspiracy now in the matter of a few hours, where there is this kind of cover up being done by social media. It's harder to find this video, like snippets of these videos that were originally was circulating a lot beforehand. Now the circulation is off the correction and people doing the correction. But there's something fishy going on because it doesn't make sense how this guy, it wasn't just a one-off gaffe. He kind of went on to explain this thing that I'm going to show you. But anyway, I'll get to the video and I'll show you the question first and then Boris Johnson's reply.
Out of all the announced daily COVID cases, what percentage of these have had none, one, or both of their vaccination injections?
It's a good question. And they're the type of questions that we'll eventually have to ask our leaders here in Australia. Let's see how Boris answers that question.
Right, that is a very good question. I think sadly the number of COVID cases that have involved somebody who's had two vaccinations has been rising, though clearly the results of the vaccines remain very good in the sense that they protect those people very largely against serious illness and death, even if they contract it. But on the exact figures, I wonder whether Patrick, you have something to add there.
All right, so the number of hospitalizations of people who have been double jabbed, according to the Prime Minister of the UK, is rising. Now, he's saying there's nothing to be too concerned here, but it is rising, correct? And for further clarification, he says, let's put it to our chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance. Now, let's see what Patrick has to say.
Patrick, you have something to add there.
Well, in terms of the number of people in hospital who've been double vaccinated, we know it's around 60% of the people being admitted to hospital with COVID have been double vaccinated. And that's not surprising because the vaccines are not 100% effective. They're very, very effective, but not 100%. And as a higher proportion of the population is double vaccinated, it's inevitable that those 10% of that very large number remain at risk and therefore will be amongst the people who both catch the infection and end up in hospital.
Now, Sir Patrick Vallance has set the internet on fire because this has gone completely viral over the last hour and a half, 2 hours. And people are saying that this is so dangerous, what he said, for sharing this information. And all the anti-vaxxers apparently have caught onto this and latched onto this to undermine the vaccination program in the UK and around the world. You have to understand that this is a very senior government official, a sir nonetheless, I'm guessing a very smart bloke, that has made this comment, right, initially. Of course, people are going to take notice. And this is in one of the countries with one of the highest vaccination rates in the world on the day that they're getting freedom. So it's, people are going to take notice of what's being said. So let's look at the correction that was issued a few hours later after all this had blown up. This is the correction that is being latched onto by, social media and by the media to say that, oh, well, it was a mistake that he made, and he actually meant to say that it was unvaccinated people that account for 60% of hospitalizations. Let's read his tweet. Correcting a statistic I gave at the press conference today, 19th July, about 60% of hospitalizations from COVID are not from double vaccinated people. Rather, 60% of hospitalizations from COVID are currently from unvaccinated people. So if you read that on the face of it, it seems like, oh, he's just made a gaffe between, one word where he was meant to say unvaccinated, he said vaccinated. But if we actually go back and listen to what he says and some of the further explanations he gives for what he says, he's giving a very detailed explanation of why you're having more people who are double jabbed ending up in hospital. It's not just a simple gaffe. It's not just like saying the wrong word. He's actually given, his ideas and thoughts around this thing he's explaining, right? So this correction doesn't really go to what he said. It's just being put out there so people can be like, no, but he ended up correcting it, and it's meant to be 60% of people who are unvaccinated who are in hospital. So take that, you anti-vaxxers and all these people using this to undermine our vaccination programs. So I'm going to now listen again. We're going to listen again to what he said, right, in light of the correction that he's given, and see if it lines up with what he said.
On the exact figures, I wonder whether, Patrick, you have something to add there.
Well, in terms of the number of people in hospital who've been double vaccinated, we know it's around 60% of the people being admitted to hospital with COVID have been double vaccinated. And that's not surprising because the vaccines are not 100% effective. They're very, very effective, but not 100%. And as a higher proportion of the population is double vaccinated, it's inevitable that those 10% of that very large number remain at risk and therefore will be amongst the people who both catch the infection and end up in hospital.
Now, you've heard that again. You've seen his explanation, his retraction that he's offered. Two things. This could be a genuine retraction, and he could have meant to say a different percentage of people who are double jabbed are in hospital, and he just inadvertently said 60%. So it could be the opposite of this, right? It could be 40% of people who have either been double jabbed or vaccinated who are ending up in hospital. But, he goes on to explain the concept of double jabbed and what's happening in the hospitals. So it's not like again, I'm saying the same thing, I'm being repetitive, but it's not like he, misread what the question was and he couldn't correct himself as he was going. No, he actually went into a detailed explanation. And I'm going to put the rest of the explanation that he gave as well. Here it is.
So whilst vaccines are very effective at reducing severe disease, they're also effective at reducing the chance of catching it and reducing the chance of passing it on. But they're slightly less effective at doing that than they are at preventing severe disease. And so what we will see as we get the, let's say if everybody over the 18 had taken up the vaccine, then of course anybody who caught it would be double vaccinated. So the answer is that we should expect to see a higher proportion of people in hospital and catching the infection who are double vaccinated. That is inevitable that we will see that because of the the less than 100% efficacy of the vaccines overall.
Thanks very much, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you indeed. So there you have it. That's his very detailed explanation for the rest of that question that was asked about people in hospital who are double jabbed. And he is clearly explaining, this is a very articulate man. He's the most eminent chief scientific advisor in the UK, explaining, okay, this is not some politician. This is not Daniel Andrews getting up there and explaining something and making a gaffe. This is a bloke that's looking at this stuff all the time, right? And making these assessments all the time. And he's seen all this data and he's going into a very detailed explanation about how people who are vaccinated, who are double jabbed even, will make up a percentage of the hospitalizations. And he goes on to talk about the efficacy of the vaccines. So clearly, he's taken that question about hospitalizations and people who are vaccinated and given a very detailed answer. So his retraction doesn't really get to the heart of that. So I'm guessing this guy's going to stand up and come up with a more broader retraction on television or at a press conference down the track, because right now, this retraction that he's given doesn't actually answer anything that he said, because he's given a very detailed answer. So yeah, I don't think we'll see much of this exchange on our media here, right? In Australia, they won't show this. We might see the cleanup of it, and they might say, oh, anti-vaxxers are trying to spread a rumor that this and this happened. That's kind of the way the news gets filtered down here. But this is a live, this is just happening at the moment, and there is a cover-up afoot. Now, speaking of Freedom Day and freedom, particularly for those of us in Victoria who are awaiting our dear leader to tell us when we shall be free, it's very important to understand that even in the UK, as they go into freedom, there is coercion still occurring. There are limits and restrictions related to this freedom. And one of those is that you have to you'll have to be double jabbed, double vaccinated to enter venues. So this is the vaccine passports. So this is a way of making the vaccine mandatory. And they are doing that now they are saying things now to ensure the younger population goes and takes the vaccine. So I'm going to finish this video off with what Boris Johnson had to say as well.
I should serve notice now that by the end of September, when all over 18s will have had their chance to be double jabbed, we're planning to make full vaccination the condition of entry to nightclubs and other venues where large crowds gather. Proof of a negative test will no longer be enough.
Well, there you have it. And if you don't think that the Australian government is watching these things, if our chief health officers, if our prime minister is not going to go down this same path and push these things onto us, you're living in a fairyland. This is coming. The more that we speak up about it now, the more that we take issue with these things now and ensure that they don't, we'll do our best to raise awareness of this and ensure a number of the population, a majority of the population is aware of what's going on. We're heading down this path very, very easily. All right, guys, thanks for watching and see you all next time.